What's up, YouTube? Today we're doing the top 5 new decks for Dominaria United number 3, and today's video is about black-green body count. So what is this deck about? Basically, this deck relies on graveyard synergy, so you have a lot of creatures that are pretty aggressively slanted in the early game that also mill you some cards into your graveyard, and then whenever you get enough cards in your graveyard, you're throwing down these 2 to 3 mana creatures that grow bigger depending on how many cards are in your graveyard. So they could easily be like 3/3s, 4/4s, or bigger depending on how much you've built. And then late game, they're going to be just massive creatures. And we also have the Writhing Necromass. So this one gets cheaper for each creature in your graveyard. So as we're milling ourselves some creatures, we're going to be able to cast this earlier and earlier, and hopefully you can get it out maybe turn 3 or 4, and then you'll have a 5/5 Death Touch on the battlefield, which is pretty good. The deck has a few non-creatures, so we got Liliana of the Veil, we've got the Meathook Massacre, mostly just for removal, some stabilizing. Because Liliana's Plus has you discard a card, it can kind of synergize with what you want to do anyway by getting some creatures in the graveyard. And Meathook Massacre doesn't really affect us so much because we don't mind if a lot of our creatures die because we can get them back later. So let's go ahead and look at the creature choices for this. In the first one drop slots, we got Cold Conscript. So this is a 1 mana 2/1. It enters tapped, but the main reason we want this one is because whenever a non-skeleton creature dies under your control, you can return it to the battlefield for 2 mana. So if your creatures trade with some of the opponent's creatures or they get killed off, then you can bring back your 1-drop for only 2 mana, which is pretty dope. Or even if you Meathook Massacre yourself and you still have a few mana open, you could bring your guys back to the battlefield. So it kind of all works out well. And the other 1-drop we got is Death Wanted Sprout. So this is a 1/1, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card. And then if there are 3 or more creatures in your graveyard, you transform it into a 3/3. And the 3/3 basically can keep getting bigger if you exile creatures from your graveyard, which you may want to not do, so that you can so that you don't lose your creature count. But you can also exile it from the opponent's graveyard if they have any in there, so that can work for you. So anyway, those are the 1-drops. They're both pretty good and they synergize well. And then for the 2-drops, we got Undead Butler, which is probably the weakest card in the deck, but it has some purposes. For example, it's a 1/2, it mills 3, which helps get us to the creature count in the graveyard. And then when it dies, you bring back a creature to your hand. So especially if you get like a Writhing Necromass in your graveyard, you might want to bring it back to your hand so that you can cast it for like 3 or 4 mana afterwards. So that's kind of the hope. You could also grab one of your creatures that are going to be growing really big, like one of these two, something like that, to kind of help you have a much bigger creature than the 1/2 that you lost. So yeah, that's kind of that. You also have Tenacious Underdog, just a pretty solid 2 mana 3/2 that you can bring back for 4 mana from the graveyard over and over again to get card draw and put some aggression on, stuff like that. And let's see, the last 2-drop is this Urborg Lurgoyf. So as it is, it's an X over 1+X, which is the number of creatures in your graveyard. And it has a kicker for 1 blue or black, and you can mill yourself for 3 cards for each time you kicked it. So this deck only has green or black, so you can really only kick it the 1 time if you want to. And yeah, so probably this one is one you don't want to play as early unless you've already got maybe your Death Wanted Sprout on the battlefield, or you've played Butler or something. Then you might play this after. Maybe even save it for turn 3 so you can have the kicker. But hopefully the goal is to get this to be like a 4/5 or you know, even bigger than that if you can. And then we also have Old Stick Fingers, and this is X plus 2 mana, black and a green, and you can also pay X to mill X number of creatures from your deck. So this is always going to hit creatures, which is good. And but in order to do it, you have to pay the X. So probably turn 4 or something like that, you would want to cast this one. Alright, and the other 3 drops are Llanowar Green Widow. It's just a 3 mana 4/3 with Reach and Trample that also has the ability to come back from the graveyard for a certain amount of mana. And then Spawn of Turg. Just have a 1 of these in here. It doesn't synergize as well. It has a milling effect on upkeep, which is good. It has a little bit of life gain if you're willing to sacrifice lands, but its power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. So basically it's only going to get stronger if you can mill the cards with your Deathsprout or your Undead Butler or something like that. So not sure how good it will be. If it may be better than I think. Maybe 50% of the deck's lands, right? So I guess there's a good shot this will be like a 2/5 or a 3/5 or something, which is not bad. Alright, and lands are pretty standard. There's not as good mana in this set, so I'm using Thran Portal to kind of get your green or black early game, but you do have to pay life for it, so that's the downside for that. We also have the Triumph, 3 of them. You don't really want tapped land on turn 1 since you have a lot of 1-drops, so that's why I only have 3, but the cycling is good for the Urg as well as late game. And then I have 2 Takenuma Abandoned Mires because we're going to have a lot of creatures in our graveyard, and this has a mill effect, so just synergizes super well with the deck. Alright, and that's it for the deck. Hope you get to try it out on the ladder. Pretty long time since we had a good black-green deck, so I'm hoping this one will be at least decent. It looks pretty promising with the stick fingers and the Lurgoyf, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna try it out first week, see how it goes, and looks super fun either way. Anyway, that's it for the video. Until next time, see ya.